Hello and welcome to the Fandom Zone. We made it to the final movie in phase 2 of my MCU rewatch, Ant-Man. Full disclosure, I was never really high on this movie. I always thought it was the best Ant-Man movie, but that's not really saying much. But I remember when I first saw this movie, I started to recognize the MCU formula of movie making, especially when it came to origin stories. There is a subversion to this formula, however, in the sense that Ant-Man, Scott Lang, he doesn't really grow or change at all in this movie. Even though he's a criminal, his morals and motives are still golden. He only steals from rich people to give back to the people that they stole from, and he only steals again to provide and to be closer to his daughter and to prevent Hank Pym's technology from getting into the wrong hands. The two characters that actually have emotional growth are Hope and Hank Pym. They have a catharsis about the death of Janet, and that really helps them change their bitterness. Hank felt responsible and dedicated his life into proving his theories on the quantum realm, and once Hope finds out what actually happens, she really lets go of all the animosity she had towards her father, and in the post-credit scene, he finally allows her to take up the mantle of Wasp. I think it's a really interesting choice to make Scott Lang the Ant-Man that's introduced in the MCU, since the more well-known one is Hank Pym. It adds a whole other layer of world building in this universe by establishing that there have already been superheroes for decades. Eventually, they even made a whole what if episode about the Avengers in the 80s or 90s or something. But part of me can't help to think, what if Hank and Jan were founding members of the Avengers like they are in most continuities? They helped take down Loki in the original comic, they helped found the team in the Ultimates, and were a part of the original team in the best thing Marvel has ever done, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I feel like they're just core members of the Avengers and wonder what would this universe look like if they were on the team instead. They have a really versatile skill set and would have loved to see that utilized in a team setting. Instead, the Ant-Man squad seems so far removed from the Avengers, even after this movie, and I don't feel like they're a part of it until Avengers Endgame. Not to nitpick because I do enjoy this movie, but I'm just curious to see what would happen if down the line you introduce Scott as the new Ant-Man, as Hank then becomes Yellow Jacket. Anyway, back to the actual movie. I think this movie does a really good job of showing just how useful Ant-Man can actually be. From things like showing how resourceful ants can be, how his size makes him a difficult target to hit, and how things like knowing how to throw a punch in a shrunken state are important, while also balancing the humor by acknowledging the absurdity of this character, because let's be honest, the idea of this character is ridiculous and shouldn't work outside of comics from the 60s and 70s. But the filmmakers somehow managed to make this character cool and interesting without making him Giant Man. Yet. The main way they achieve this is through the spectacle of the whole Honey, I Shrunk the Kids scenes. Like when Scott first shrinks in the bathroom and is fumbling through the apartment building, the training montage of him jumping through a keyhole and running underground, and the third act train fight that takes place in a little girl's bedroom. Scale is exhibited so well in this movie and is what truly makes this movie shine. Another reason why this movie works so well is they establish who Scott is and what his skills are before he becomes Ant-Man. Even though him breaking into a house ended up being a setup, it displayed how smart of an engineer and thief Scott is by showing us how resourceful and quick-witted he is. I think Paul Rudd is a great fit for this role. He's a very funny actor, and you need someone who can play off the absurdity of the character while also being able to deliver sincere moments. Edgar Wright was the original writer and director for this movie, and I can't help but to think what his original version would have looked like. He left due to creative differences, and he didn't like the constraints required to fit the story in the wider MCU. The scenes where Luis explains his long, rambling stories are probably the best scenes in the movie, and just feel so Edgar Wright to me. He is still credited as a writer and producer, but I just wonder how much remained from his original script. Speaking of Luis, a detail I never noticed before was when he picks up Scott from prison, he says,
You know what? I'm still the only one to knock him out.
and in the final act, every person he punches gets knocked out in one punch. Darren Cross might actually be the scariest antagonist out of any of these movies up until this point. He is so unstable, and it's even scarier because he's not some red-faced Yahtzee or an alien conqueror. He's just a normal dude. He straight up doesn't value life at all, whether that's human or animal.
I thought we were using mice.
What's the difference?
He straight up turns a dude to jelly because he doesn't agree with his research and intentions. Like, dude, you can just sell it to somebody else. Literally, right after this, the dude who gets his face smashed by Hank Pym is trying to invest. Just let it go, bro. Also, him just spawning in Hank Pym's house in the middle of the night in a nefarious, up to no good turtleneck jacket combo is actually terrifying. This is a pretty grounded movie, and this just felt a little too real for me. His motivations in this movie all come from how his mentor, Hank Pym, was just like, yeah, nah, I'm not really rocking with you anymore. That's it. This dude just cannot let stuff go and is doing a lot of this out of spite. Dude is a diamond ranked hater. I mentioned earlier that this is the final movie in Phase 2. The post-credit scene is actually a clip from the next movie, Captain America: Civil War. So let's just take a moment in this MCU rewatch to reflect overall on Phase 2. Phase 2 took current characters and pushed them into new directions while also introducing new ones, and really took some big steps forward in the Infinity Saga. Comparing the highs and lows between Phase 1 and Phase 2, I think that the highs are higher and more frequent in Phase 2, as opposed to Phase 1. With movies like Captain America: Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Avengers: Age of Ultron are high points, Ant-Man is mid-level, and Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World are towards the bottom. Not bad, just not as entertaining as the others. Compared to Phase 1, Iron Man, Captain America: The First Avenger, and The Avengers being high points, and The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, and Thor are the mid-tier. So overall, there's only been like 1 or 2 movies that I haven't really liked, both from Phase 2. Phase 2 is also the start of productions under Disney, and with that came a few notable changes. First is the decision to film these movies on digital instead of on film. This is where the whole idea behind the MCU looks so flat and desaturated comes from. Shooting on an analog format like film, there's really no limit to how crisp the image can be, but the drawback is that the filmmakers can't look back at any of the footage on set and have to wait until the film has been fully developed. From a business standpoint, it makes sense to shoot these movies on digital if your goal is to pump as many of these out as possible, but the image quality is going to suffer for it. Another change that came from the mouse is the lack of drinking, smoking, and sex. I mentioned in a few of my Phase 1 rewatch videos how much these things stand out when you rewatch these movies like 10 plus years later. To be fair, there is a bit of drinking in some of the Phase 2 projects, but with the exception of Iron Man 3, which was still released under Paramount, there is nary a cigarette, cigar, or pipe in Phase 2. Not even from the bad guys. Like, come on, you're telling me you're not going to give Baron von Strucker a pipe, a German warmonger who already has a monocle? I mean, not even one of those long cigarette holders like in Django or Breakfast at Tiffany's? Like, come on, that's a missed opportunity, Marvel. What are you doing? I'm not sure why Disney has such a strong stance on smoking. I mean, I get you don't want to promote to kids because Walt Disney smoked 3 packs a day and died of lung cancer, but there's literally so many photos of Walt Disney that have been edited so that he's not holding cigarettes. So much so that Disney park employees have been instructed to use the 2-finger point, and this gesture even made it into that movie they made about him with Tom Hanks. They're literally trying to retcon history right in front of our eyes. And don't even get me started on how sexless the MCU has become since the mouse has stepped in. I've seen a few people mention it online, but I think I need to make a separate video after this whole rewatch is over. But basically any innuendo or forced gaze upon someone's body post Phase 1 is only played for a joke, and there's actually no real sex appeal or sexual attraction for or between any of these characters. I'm not saying that a movie needs this to be good, I'm just pointing out how noticeable it is upon a rewatch after knowing that this franchise has been purchased by Disney. I will continue to monitor this situation going forward. Anyway, here are all the Phase 2 Stan Lee cameos ranked. At number 6, I have his cameo in Iron Man 3, just an old spectator at a beauty pageant. And number 5, I have his cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy, where he pretty much just gets roasted by Rocket.
Look at Mr. Smiles over here. You like art. Where's your wife, old man? What a Class A prevert.
At number 4, I have his appearance in Ant-Man. He's in the scene teasing that an Avenger is looking for Ant-Man. At number 3, I have his appearance in Captain America Winter Soldier. He plays the oldest security guard ever.
Oh, man. I am so fired.
At number 2, I have his cameo in Thor the Dark World, where he plays an old man in a loony bin who volunteered his shoe.
Yeah, can I have my shoe back?
And at number 1, I have his Age of Ultron cameo, where he's one of Cap's war buddies from World War II. He gets drunk off Asgardian elixir, and he even gets to say his famous catchphrase.
Is not meant for mortal men.
Neither was Omaha Beach, Blondie. Stop trying to scare us. Come on. Excelsior.
R.I.P. Stan. Overall, I'm glad I rewatched this movie because it was a lot better than I remembered. I think all of the shrinking stuff is really well done, the jokes land pretty well, and the world building adds a lot to establish this universe. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I just also want to say thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers. This means a lot to me because at the beginning of the year, I wasn't even at 100, so thank you so much to everyone who's supported me so far. This is definitely going to motivate me to push out more content, so thank you. I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.